Most people waste years trying to win over toxic people, hoping if they're kind enough, patient enough, or quiet enough, they'll finally be treated with respect. But here's the truth: toxic people don't respond to kindness, they respond to strength. And the moment a woman learns to master this one thing, everything changes. You stop being a target, you stop being manipulated, and you start being respected. When it comes to toxic people, most women are conditioned to believe that being nice, agreeable, or endlessly patient is the way to keep the peace. But the hard truth is this: kindness without boundaries is an invitation for exploitation. Toxic people thrive on testing your limits. They push, they probe, they manipulate, and they keep taking more and more until you finally push back. That's why boundaries are your greatest weapon against manipulation. A boundary is not just a line you draw for others, it is a declaration of how much you respect yourself. It communicates clearly and without apology what you will and will not tolerate. The reason toxic people fear boundaries is because boundaries strip away their power. They rely on confusion, guilt, and emotional pressure to bend you to their will, but a firm boundary shuts all of that down instantly. Think about it. If someone constantly interrupts you or disrespects your time, and you continue to let it slide, you're training them to believe you don't value yourself. But the moment you say, "I don't allow interruptions when I'm speaking," or "my time is valuable and I won't tolerate it being wasted," the entire dynamic shifts. You take control of the interaction and force them to recognize that you are not someone they can easily dominate. Toxic people hate this because it exposes their weakness. They can only control those who allow it. Boundaries pull the rug out from under their tactics. What most people misunderstand about boundaries is that they're not about being aggressive, rude, or confrontational. Boundaries are calm, consistent, and firm. You don't need to yell, argue, or explain endlessly. In fact, the quieter and more composed you are, the more powerful your boundaries become. When you say no and mean it, you don't leave room for debate. Toxic people thrive on debate because it gives them an opening to wear you down, but a clear, short, unapologetic statement leaves them nowhere to go. This is why boundaries are so effective. They take away the weapon toxic people depend on, your emotional reaction. Another reason boundaries are powerful is because they protect your energy. Toxic people will drain you with constant demands, guilt trips, and manipulations. Without boundaries, you end up exhausted, resentful, and questioning your worth. With boundaries, you conserve your energy for the things and people who actually matter. You reclaim your focus and stop wasting time on battles that don't serve you. Every time you enforce a boundary, you reinforce to yourself that you matter. You are training yourself to honor your own worth, and that is where true confidence comes from. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not negotiable. Once you set them, you must uphold them. If you bend your own rules, toxic people will see it as weakness and double down on their manipulation. They're constantly watching how you respond, testing whether you'll fold. The consistency with which you enforce your boundaries determines how seriously people take you. And this is why toxic people fear them. They cannot win against consistency. They cannot manipulate someone who refuses to be moved. They cannot drain someone who refuses to give their energy away freely. Every time you set and enforce a boundary, you are not only protecting yourself, you are training others how to treat you. You are sending a message that your value is non-negotiable. And for toxic people, that is the one thing they cannot stand because it makes you untouchable. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of power, yet it is the one thing that completely disarms toxic people. They thrive on reaction, your anger, your frustration, your explanations, your justifications. Every word you give them is fuel for their manipulation. The more you explain yourself, the more they twist your words, the more you try to prove your point, the deeper they pull you into their game. Silence takes that weapon away. It denies them the energy they crave, the control they want, and the satisfaction of seeing you rattled. When you refuse to explain or justify, you strip them of the opportunity to manipulate your emotions and dictate the terms of the conversation. What makes silence so powerful is that it unsettles them. Toxic people are used to dominating with words. using criticism, guilt, or pressure to provoke a reaction. But when you choose not to engage, when you let their words hang in the air unanswered, you create discomfort they can't tolerate. Suddenly they are the ones scrambling for control. They keep talking, they push harder, they try different tactics, but your silence is a mirror showing them their own weakness. It reminds them they don't control you, you control yourself. That is what they fear most. Silence is not weakness, it's not avoidance, it's strategy. It's about refusing to give someone the response they're fishing for. If a toxic person tries to bait you with insults, your silence communicates that you are unshaken. If they demand you justify your choices, your silence communicates that your choices are not up for debate. If they press for explanations, your silence communicates that you don't owe them one. Silence is authority. It draws the line without you having to defend it. The less you say, the stronger your position becomes. It's also important to understand that silence protects your energy. Toxic people thrive on emotional chaos. They want you drained, confused, and second-guessing yourself, but silence removes you from that chaos. It keeps you grounded, calm, and in control of your own emotions. You don't have to argue, you don't have to convince, you don't have to waste energy proving yourself to someone who has no intention of understanding you anyway. Silence reminds you that not every comment deserves a response, not every question deserves an answer, and not every person deserves access to your inner world. This kind of silence also forces toxic people to reveal themselves. When you don't feed into their games, they expose their true intentions. They'll push harder, their words will get sharper, their desperation more obvious. In that space, you can see them clearly for what they are: not powerful, not intimidating, but insecure individuals who only have as much power as you give them. Silence allows you to observe without reacting, to step back and recognize that their behavior has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their need for control. Practicing silence requires discipline. It's not easy to resist defending yourself when someone attacks. It's not easy to walk away from a heated exchange without proving your point. But each time you hold your silence, you are reminding yourself that your peace is worth more than winning an argument. You're showing yourself that you don't need validation from someone who doesn't respect you in the first place. That kind of restraint is true strength. Toxic people fear it because they cannot manipulate someone who refuses to play the game. And once they realize you won't give them what they want, they lose interest. Silence starves them of control, and that is the one thing they cannot survive without. Toxic people are masters at testing your self-respect. They do it in small ways at first, like making a dismissive comment, ignoring your opinion, or pushing past a minor boundary just to see if you'll let it slide. If you do, they see it as permission to go further. Every time you ignore their behavior or excuse it, you communicate to them that your self-respect is negotiable. That is exactly what they look for: an opening, a weakness, a signal that you will allow disrespect as long as it doesn't cause too much conflict. The truth is, toxic people don't need you to hand over your power all at once. They take it little by little, testing your limits every step of the way until they've conditioned you to accept less than you deserve. This is why passing their tests every time is critical. When you respect yourself enough to confront behavior in the moment, you immediately shut down their game. You make it clear that even small acts of disrespect won't slide. For example, if someone repeatedly interrupts you, the moment you calmly say, "I'm still speaking," and continue without flinching, you've passed the test. If someone makes a sarcastic comment about you in front of others and you respond with steady eye contact and say, "That's not acceptable," you've passed the test. Each response reinforces your self-respect, and with each reinforcement, you make it harder for toxic people to get away with their usual tactics. They hate this because it leaves them no room to maneuver. They cannot manipulate someone who refuses to compromise their standards. What makes these tests dangerous is how subtle they can be. Toxic people don't always come at you with blatant disrespect. They chip away at your self-respect through microaggressions, small digs, jokes at your expense, or constant boundary pushing. If you're not paying attention, it's easy to normalize this behavior and convince yourself it's not worth addressing. But the moment you let one thing go, you're setting the tone for what comes next. Passing the test isn't about winning an argument or proving a point. It's about showing consistently that your self-respect is non-negotiable. It's not about fighting, it's about refusing to compromise who you are. Self-respect is also about the standards you set for yourself, not just how you deal with others. Toxic people can only get away with what you allow. If you value your time, you won't tolerate people who waste it. If you value your energy, you won't allow people to drain it. If you value your voice, you won't let people silence it. Self-respect is a filter. It determines what enters your life and what doesn't. And toxic people test that filter constantly, looking for holes they can slip through. When you strengthen that filter and show them that every attempt to break it fails, you become untouchable in their eyes. It's important to understand that passing these tests isn't about being aggressive or confrontational. It's about being steady, consistent, and clear in how you carry yourself. You don't need to shout to prove your self-respect. You don't need to justify why you deserve better. Your calm refusal to bend speaks louder than anything else. Toxic people will try to provoke you into overreacting because it shifts the attention away from their behavior and onto yours. But when you stay composed and hold your ground, you take away their power to rewrite the narrative. Every time you pass a test, you train both yourself and others to honor your value. You prove to yourself that you will not betray your own standards just to avoid discomfort or keep the peace. And that is what toxic people fear most, a woman who refuses to compromise her self-respect, no matter how subtle or calculated the pressure may be. They know they cannot control someone who values herself too much to be controlled. That kind of unshakable self-respect is a shield they cannot penetrate and a strength they cannot overcome. Detachment is one of the most powerful tools you can use against toxic people because it removes the very thing they rely on, your emotional involvement. Toxic people want you hooked. They want you triggered, invested, and reacting, because when your emotions are tangled up with theirs, they can pull the strings. Detachment severs that connection. It's not about being cold or uncaring. It's about refusing to let their behavior dictate your state of mind. When you detach, you take away their ability to control how you feel, and without that control, they lose their leverage. Detachment means you stop internalizing their words and actions. If they criticize you, you don't absorb it as truth. If they try to guilt you, you don't carry the weight of their manipulation. If they withhold affection or approval, you don't bend over backwards to earn it. Instead, you observe their behavior for what it is, an attempt to manipulate, and you respond from a place of clarity rather than emotion. This kind of detachment drives toxic people crazy because it makes their tactics useless. They can throw out every insult, every guilt trip, every attempt to push your buttons, but when you remain unaffected, it shows them they no longer have access to your emotional core. What makes detachment so effective is that it forces toxic people to confront their own emptiness. When you don't react, they're left with themselves, and often that's the one thing they can't stand. They feed off the chaos they create in others because it distracts them from their own dysfunction. Detachment deprives them of that outlet. It leaves them powerless, exposed, and frustrated because without your reactions, their games fall flat. They're like a performer on stage with no audience. Suddenly, all their efforts feel pointless. Practicing detachment also gives you freedom. You're no longer stuck in cycles of defending yourself, proving your worth, or trying to fix situations that were designed to break you. Detachment allows you to conserve your energy for the things that actually matter, your goals, your relationships with healthy people, your peace of mind. It shifts your focus from reacting to controlling what you can control, yourself. And when you master yourself, no toxic person can ever truly touch you. They might throw chaos your way, but it won't stick because you've already decided their chaos doesn't belong to you. The challenge with detachment is that toxic people know how to provoke. They'll escalate their behavior when they realize they're losing control. They'll try harder to get a reaction, sometimes even using kindness or charm as bait to reel you back in. This is where your discipline comes in. True detachment isn't temporary, it's consistent. It's not about cutting off your emotions entirely, but about choosing where those emotions go. You don't waste them on someone who only uses them against you. You reserve them for the people and experiences that uplift you instead of drain you. Detachment also doesn't mean indifference. You can still care about someone and be detached from their toxicity. It means you've separated who they are from what they do to you. You see them clearly without allowing their behavior to damage your self-worth. That level of clarity is powerful because it gives you options. You can walk away, you can set boundaries, or you can choose minimal contact, all while staying centered and calm. Toxic people can't stand that because they can no longer dictate your choices. Every time you practice detachment, you send a message: you don't own me, you don't control me, and you don't get to decide how I feel. That message terrifies toxic people because it leaves them powerless. They thrive on entangling others in their dysfunction, but detachment cuts those ties completely. Once you've detached, their control dissolves, and what's left is your strength, your peace, and your freedom, the very things they fear the most. Confidence is not something you declare with words, it is something you enforce with action. Toxic people are skilled at spotting surface-level confidence, the kind that looks strong on the outside but crumbles under pressure. They test whether what you project matches how you actually live. If you say you're confident but you allow disrespect, they see through it. If you speak about your worth but you tolerate people crossing your boundaries, they know your confidence is only skin deep. What truly makes toxic people fear you is confidence that doesn't need to be spoken because it shows up in everything you do. It's in the way you carry yourself, the choices you make, and the consistency with which you uphold your standards. Real confidence is quiet, steady, and unwavering. It doesn't need to announce itself or demand recognition. It shows up when you walk away from situations that don't serve you instead of trying to prove your value to people who can't see it. It shows up when you say no without apology, when you choose your peace over approval, and when you keep moving forward even when others doubt you. Toxic people hate this kind of confidence because it makes them irrelevant. They can't use guilt, criticism, or manipulation to control you when your actions demonstrate that you are already in control of yourself. Confidence enforced through action also reshapes how people treat you. When others see that you back up your words with behavior, they recognize that you are not someone to be played with. You don't just talk about self-respect, you embody it. You don't just say you value your time, you enforce it by not giving it away freely. You don't just claim to be independent, you prove it by making decisions that align with your goals instead of bending to external pressure. Toxic people thrive on finding cracks between words and actions, but when there are no cracks, they realize they have no leverage. Another reason toxic people fear this kind of confidence is because it exposes their insecurity. They often use intimidation and manipulation to mask their own lack of control. But when you stand firm in your actions, it highlights their weakness. They can criticize, mock, or dismiss you, but when your behavior consistently contradicts their attempts to undermine you, it reveals them as powerless. Confidence through action is a mirror, reflecting their inability to shake you, and that terrifies them. This level of confidence doesn't happen overnight. It's built through repetition. Every time you make a choice that honors your values, you reinforce your confidence. Every time you stand firm instead of bending to pressure, you strengthen it. Every time you walk away from something toxic without looking back, you embody it. Over time, your confidence becomes unshakable because it's rooted not in what you say, but in what you do. Toxic people can't manipulate someone whose actions consistently prove their strength. It's also important to note that true confidence is not arrogance. It's not about putting others down or constantly reminding people of your worth. It's about living in alignment with your principles and refusing to compromise them for the sake of being liked or accepted. Arrogance seeks validation. Confidence through action doesn't need it. This is why toxic people find it so threatening, because you don't need anything from them. You're not seeking approval, validation, or acceptance, and without that leverage, they have nothing to offer you and nothing to take away. Confidence enforced through action is ultimately about self-mastery. It's the decision to let your life speak louder than your words, to let your standards speak louder than your defenses, and to let your consistency speak louder than any toxic person's attempts to undermine you. That's why they fear it, because they can't argue with action, they can't twist behavior that's unwavering, and they can't control someone whose confidence is lived, not spoken.